Hi everybody, Michael Wagner, one of the co-founders at Omnia. I want to thank you for spending a bit of your time today with us. I've got a really special guest, and I'm really thrilled to be here today with Joe Lonsdale. He's an entrepreneur, co-founder of many companies, but one you may be familiar with is Adapar, an investor as well. And so, Joe, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, it's really nice to see you. Listen, you have started and run a number of successful companies. Is there anything in your past or your story that you think really gave you the sort of the catalyst and the push to kind of be who you are today?
Well, you know, I was really lucky to grow up in Silicon Valley, surrounded by a lot of top talent. And it happened to be at the time when I was growing up, there were a lot of new things that were possible thanks to technology. So I'm not excited about technology for its own sake for business, but I'm excited about what technology enables in business. And so a lot of times what happens when there's, you know, it became a cheesy word in the late 90s, but when there's a new paradigm, when there's a new way of doing things, it enables lots of new companies to be created. And so if you go back with the history of Silicon Valley and the history of technology, there's these waves you see the last 100 years of companies. And these waves happen because all of a sudden there was a new possibility. So one of the first waves was the electronics wave. And you know, the biggest company of that was HP, built in Silicon Valley. The two top students at Stanford, you know, with their professor, brought them together, brought a lot of talent in. And you had all these new things possible because of the wave of electronics in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And you know, and then you know, the second big wave was the semiconductor industry. So this was obviously, you know, the first guys at Shockley Labs that left to build Fairchild. It's a funny story. Do you know the history there? The 8 of them. They're called the Traitorous 8. Yeah, Kleiner was one of them. He's the Traitorous 8, and they leave and then you know you know I guess this guy Shockley was a Nobel Prize winner who brought all the top talent together, but he kept giving them lie detector tests, and so they're like, we cannot work with this guy. And so Fairchild was very successful, and yeah, out of that came Eugene Kleiner of Kleiner Perkins, came the guys who built Intel and everything else, and that's why it's called Silicon Valley, the silicon and the wafers to make the chips. And then of course a lot of these guys, the reason Kleiner I think started these venture funds is in order to sell computers, you need a new software, and all of a sudden there was new software that was possible. There's ways you can run logistics, you know, inventory, you know, all of our industries in America. A lot of them are actually till today are running on software that was kind of initially built in that 1960s, 70s way. That was the enterprise software wave. And then you had the networking wave where all these companies help them connect and talk to each other and work with each other. And really out of that kind of led to the internet, because when you start connecting everything and you put it in place, you basically get the internet wave. We call that the consumer wave, really. That's really what it was, right? It's the late 90s. It was all these new consumer companies and new possibilities with Amazon and Google and Yahoo. And the consumer wave really breaks down into 3 waves. It's the web 1.0 with the original bubble. It's the web 2.0, which is like Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And then it's the mobile wave, which is obviously with Steve Jobs creating the iPhone. You have all these new companies. You can't have Uber and Lyft before the mobile wave, right? It wouldn't make any sense. And interestingly, you can't have Uber or Lyft started now because it's been possible for 15 years.
Right.
So it's really important as an entrepreneur, as an investor, if you want to build big companies on the venture side, the question is what's possible now. And so the more recent waves is, you know, thanks to the cloud, you've had the smart enterprise wave. And you know, you have these new innovations in biology. There's a revolution going on with new tools in biology that let you write and read really accurately. So there's a whole new wave of bio companies. Obviously, we all saw that with mRNA recently, but there's a lot of other things there. And there's a lot of new things in AI. And so there's still a lot of new stuff going on. And I was kind of lucky to have all these kind of quick waves hitting when I was growing up. So I had all this talents around me. There are new possibilities, and we were able to take them and build things.
Sure. I think of so much of like what you do and what's happening in the tech space is really problem solving, right? Where you're using technology to solve problems. Was there a big problem that you saw that you were trying to solve initially? Are you willing to say that was solved? Are you still working on that?
Well, I mean, the Palantir was the first big company I built. Is this Palantir or Adapar? So you know, Palantir, we started the big problem. So I was at PayPal as a kid.
Sure.
Elon Musk and Peter Thiel founded separate companies that ended up merging. So everyone's like, why did everyone out of PayPal build so many companies? Well, now you guys know who Elon Musk is. Now you all know who Peter Thiel is. You can see why. All their smartest friends, of course, they've built tons of big companies, right? They're two of the most talented guys of all the people who came to the center of innovation in the world. No surprise. You know, the people who left PayPal built LinkedIn, they built Yelp, they built YouTube, they built all these companies. I was lucky to be like a little kid in that group. I'm 15 years younger than Peter. And I, you know, at PayPal, the challenge, one of the big challenges was the Chinese and Russian mafia were stealing all of our money. It was a huge problem at the time. And you know, a lot of our competitors went bankrupt. And we had to build investigative tools we tried to build AI to catch the bad guys, but the bad guys would change their behavior. AI was not smart enough; it can't keep up. So you actually made our smartest customer service people into investigators. We built tools for them, and that we call it man-machine symbiosis. Like having AI detect things, then having our smartest people look at it, look through data, and ask questions. That combination, we were able to catch enough of the fraud to make PayPal profitable, which then enabled it to be sold to eBay. And the story goes on from there. Around that time, when you catch the bad guys, you'd report them. It turned out it was like the FBI and the Secret Service who were in charge of these things. And we got to know these guys, and they'd start asking us questions. Oh, what do we do with this data thing? What do we do? We've never heard of this before. How does this work? And it was fun. You kind of help them catch bad guys, and so you got to know them really well. And we saw 9/11 happen after this, after we kind of got to know them, and we saw the government spending billions of dollars on like really stupid stuff after 9/11. It was like, oh my God. Because I guess basically Silicon Valley, as you can imagine, had gone way ahead of the rest of the world.
Sure.
But the people who won the contracts around DC at that time were just, it was disappointing to me because you grow up as a kid hearing stories about the NSA in the 1970s, and they would do things in the 70s in the NSA that like the top people at Stanford and MIT wouldn't even figure out why until 15 years later. So the government was way ahead. It had the best people of World War II coming out of it, had the best people for a while in the Cold War. But for various cultural reasons and other things, that the government got way behind by the early 2000s. And so we saw this, having done some of these related things at PayPal, understanding data and big data and technology, and we said, wow, the government's just completely wasting billions of dollars on horrible things here. And we were worried. There's bad guys around the world. America had been attacked. Yeah. We were worried about the civil liberties, that these people in the government, they were so inept, they would just try to gather all the data, put it someplace. And you can imagine the show 24 with Jack Bauer, where he goes in to stop the terrorists. You can imagine Jack Bauer going in and illegally using all the data to stop the bad guys, because you kind of want him to get the bad guys. So the question is, how do we enable the good guys to stop the bad guys while protecting civil liberties? And that was the problem Palantir solved. Palantir, I guess we want to be careful for security reasons, but Palantir was very involved in stopping a lot of the worst bad guys. Sure. And helping capture and I guess Obama also, and Bush also attacked thousands of them, and we kind of helped figure out where they were.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't help myself, but it's almost that saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility, and you're seeing that you have the ability and the tools to help, and putting those tools to bear. Right. To solve problems for the country, for society, and for really the world.
That's right. It does to me feel a little bit like a compelling duty, where we have an understanding of this thing over here is really suboptimal compared to what's possible. It's a duty. It's also it's fun. It's it's annoying to let something broken. You used wealth management technology 20 years ago. There's a lot of frustration in how that stuff worked. As someone building out my family office later, as someone understanding that part of finance, seeing how things didn't really flow properly in that part of finance, saying, wow, the core of this is really broken. It's fun to go in and fix it.
I can tell you, I remember the day that I first saw Adapar. We were launching our own multifamily office, reviewed all of the options that were out there. And I'm a tech kid. I originally went in for computer science, found economics. So this was something that really spoke to me as a user of these tools throughout my career. Looking at it that one day, I was like, this is something that answers a lot of problems for us, answers a lot of questions. And was something that I'm an avid user of, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for bringing it into the world, because it makes my life so much easier and helps me run a better business.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
And helps the families that we work with.
Thank you. Well, the team at Adapar is so strong. We always kind of over hire for the best engineering and over focus towards product and engineering in our companies. And I think there's always ways we could have done sales even faster early on, but I'm not as good at that side. But we really want to make sure we have the very best product, and I'm really proud. I think Adapar's done a great job.
And it's just when everything works, and it's that joy of things working that I love, and it really helps us run a well-oiled machine.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can keep partner with our clients to serve their clients and to build things on top of it that help make finance work better.
Sure, absolutely. So how has any of this changed, right? What made you so successful in the beginning? Is that possible today? Is this something that, how do we replicate it? How do we move forward, build more Joe Lonsdales in society, and really, put our best foot forward?
Well, it's actually interesting you asked that, because we are trying to start a university in Austin that will challenge our other top universities to train people to think for themselves and to think courageously. To me, a big part of the reason Peter Thiel and Elon and all their friends had so many great companies come out of that group, it's not just that Peter or Elon are smarter than other people. is that they have the courage intellectually to think differently, and to think about different ways and approach things different ways. And I think that's very rare in our society right now. So I've been really inspired by people like that. If you've seen Elon, you know, he and I obviously don't agree on everything, but he'll put out these strong opinions into the world that millions of people will get to see recently, whether it's about nuclear power, or whether it's about, you know, he's doing Tesla, but he's putting out that we should be drilling for energy here, and here's why. And, you know, he's willing to speak common sense, think common sense, at least is what's common sense to him,
right,
about these issues, which I think is great. And so I think we need to train young people, instead of being scared of offending people or scared they should just go along, is to ask questions, like go back to first principles. If something doesn't make sense to them, you need to discuss it, you need to confront it. And you know, a lot of things in the world are really broken. It's not, this is one of the things about entrepreneurship, is that, to me, I see it's like the world's just so broken, like there's like so many businesses you can build. You gotta find one you're passionate about, where you see a really big gap, or you know you have the talent to bring people, and I think that framework can apply to everything.
I think that passion bit is really important. So you've talked about having fun, right? Enjoying what you're doing and while you're solving a problem. How do you find your passion, right? Because it's not, I find that every day, like we have our passion and some days it feels greater than others. How do you keep going? How do you feed the passion?
Some days it definitely feels greater than others. Your job as a leader is to inspire and to find that in yourself, right? Yeah. Sometimes even when you're, you know, sometimes you're away from home for a long time and missing my wife and daughters, sure. But it's your job to kind of dig in. But you know, I mean, it is really, for me, it is really satisfying to take something that's not working and that's broken and to figure out the path to make it functional. There's just something really compelling about that to me. So I never really lose my desire to kind of just fix things around me.
Thank you, everybody, for your time today as we sit down, and as always, consider the source. I've been Michael Wagner with Joe Lonsdale. Joe, thank you again. It's really great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Anytime. Thank you.